Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfix. This will be the continuation of Little Acts of Kindness. This will be Part 58, Chapter 58, entitled Bravery. By the time lunch finished, Izuku felt like he could return to class. "Are you sure there's nothing wrong with just staying here?" Yamada-sensei said gently, giving him a reassuring smile. He swallowed but nodded. "I'm not going to let him scare me into hiding," Izuku signed, even as his hands trembled. Aizawa gave a slight smirk at that, black eyes glinting with pride. Yamada nodded. "All right, but if it gets too much, let us know, okay?" Izuku gave a slight smile. The group walked through the halls just a bit before the lunch bell would ring. They stopped at Class 1A and Yamada smiled and ruffled his hair. "Have fun with Show's Hell course, little listener." He gave one final nod and Yamada left, heading in the direction of his own class, which made Izuku wonder just what general studies students did when they had their heroic classes. He entered the classroom, Aizawa propping himself in a corner, pulling his yellow sleeping bag out. Seconds later, the bell rang, and soon Izuku heard the chattering of students as they returned to their classrooms. The first person to arrive back in the room was Sato, who gave a nod to him before taking his own seat. Soon other students came pouring in, all of them giving him a smile, nod, or a hello upon seeing him. Tokiyami came in, and as soon as the bird-headed boy spotted him, he came over. "How are you?" the boy asked quietly. "I'm all right," Izuku signed, but then felt bad for lying a bit, even if he was doing better now. "I had a rough morning." "If you need anything, just let us know and we shall do our best to help," Tokiyami said, Dark Shadow coming out and nodding in agreement. Izuku felt like he was nodding a lot today, even as he gave a nod in response. Still, he didn't feel quite up to talking. Tokiyami took his seat nearby, and soon everyone had arrived from lunch. Aizawa stood up. "Today, you'll be practicing in Gym Iota." "What gym is that again?" Ashido questioned. "That's the gym with Aizawa's parkour course," Ida answered, hand chopping down. A groan echoed from the class, even as they got up to head towards the locker rooms. "What's so bad about it?" Shinso questioned in the locker room as they changed. "Aizawa's hell crawl is vicious, prepare to get hurt," Kaminari warned. "It can't be that bad," Shinso replied, rolling his eyes. "Your funeral, man," Kirishima said, giving a laugh. Everyone got dressed and headed towards the gym, meeting up with the girls who had beaten most of the guys there. "Good. Everyone is here. Today you'll be doing my course on the hardest mode in easy." "But we didn't even pass the medium difficulty," Kaminari whimpered. Aizawa's grin was full of teeth. "You better have been practicing then." "How hard can this actually be?" Shinso questioned, crossing his arms. Black eyes gleamed, even as Aizawa's expression was hidden behind his capture weapon. "Shinso has volunteered to go first. You have 30 seconds to get to the end of the course." Shinso stood up to the front of the line, still not understanding the danger he was in. The buzzer went off, and Shinso raced off, following the blue light. The first trap Shinso ran into was a car speeding past with no apparent brakes as Shinso tried to cross one of the streets, and the boy barely dodged it and continued running. A few traps and 30 seconds later, and the buzzer went off. Shinso had only made it a little over halfway through. The boy hobbled back, leg bruised from running into a pole that had suddenly extended. "Any volunteers?" Aizawa questioned. "Yeah, I'll smash this course," Bakugo said, stepping forward. "You weren't here when I first informed your class, but causing property damage will result in a lower grade. And you will have to write a report," Aizawa deadpanned. Bakugo scowled, but still stepped forward, doing a couple stretches. As soon as the timer buzzed, explosions sounded, and he shot off, racing after the blue line. The explosions were big enough to keep him flying, but small enough that none of the nearby buildings were damaged. As Bakugo raced through the streets, a giant flat wall suddenly swung out, and Bakugo crashed right into it, having not been successful in dodging, though he had tried. The glass stared with wide eyes. "Don't worry, that wall is filled with cotton, and only has a plastic layer. It's designed to impact high-speed flyers," Aizawa assured them. Sure enough, Bakugo was already moving through the course and crossed the finish line with a second to spare. The boy grinned. "Ha! Not even those lame traps could stop me." "Next volunteer." Mineta stepped forward, surprising the class. Aizawa nodded, and Mineta took his place. "I've been training hard recently," the boy said, and the buzzer rang. 30 seconds later, and Mineta was across the finish line, bloody and bruised, but grinning proudly. "Good job," Aizawa said, nodding. One by one, the class went through the course, Ojiro, Uraraka, Izuku, Sero, and Yaoyorozu passing. Everyone else failed. "Those of you who passed, come here," Aizawa commanded them. Izuku walked over with the others who passed. "I will have your classmates continue to run through hard difficulty, but you 7 will be allowed to roam the city, and do your best to slow down your classmates. As they pass, they will join you." Bakugo grinned, palms sparking as he turned to look at the rest of the class, who swallowed at seeing the maniacal expression. "Go," Aizawa said, gesturing towards the course. The 7 students walked in and soon were spreading out along some of the pathways they knew would light up blue. Soon, a buzzer went off, and then there was a shrill scream of terror, and a person, Aoyama, went flying up into the air, only to be yanked by a long white thing that Izuku recognized as Sero's tape. The class passed with only Tokiyami, Shoji, and Todoroki managing to pass, though Todoroki passed at the expense of some property damage and needing to file a report. As the last 20 minutes came, Aizawa ended the exercise. "All right, everyone. I'm going to demonstrate some techniques for you to observe." With that, Aizawa cranked the difficulty up and entered, the TV showing his progress as he practically danced through the city, not a movement wasted, as he dodged attacks from smaller robots that popped out of different places, alleyways, buildings, even a sewer covering. Everyone trudged out of class and back to the locker rooms, where they got changed into their school uniforms. The bell rang signaling the end of class, and his classmates started to head off. Izuku said goodbye to his friends even as he headed to Hound Dog's office. His last meeting with the counselor had been before the internships, and he had learned that he was on a therapy/quirk counseling rotating schedule. This week should be quirk counseling. Though Izuku thought he was actually doing fairly decent with his quirks now, he could train with Aizawa and Yamada if he needed help with their quirks, and now he was getting a handle on one for all. Thoughts occupied with thinking about his quirks, he didn't realize he had already arrived and sat down on the couch in Hound Dog's office. Though that reminded him that he had some theories to test about his quirks. It took him a few minutes longer, and the urge to get his journal and pen before he realized he was in Hound Dog's office and the counselor was looking at him with amusement. Izuku blushed and wondered if he had been mumbling. It didn't happen often, but sometimes his bad habit still cropped up if he got too lost in his thoughts about quirks. "How are you today?" Hound Dog questioned, giving what Izuku thought was the equivalent of a smile. It was a bit hard to tell, though, given that Hound Dog looked like a dog. Izuku didn't want to lie, so he shrugged. "I have heard the news. If you want to talk about it, feel free to come by any time," the pro-hero said. Izuku gave a nod, though he didn't want to talk about it. "Let's continue working on your quirk. How does that sound?" Hound Dog said after a moment, realizing Izuku wasn't going to speak up. "That sounds good," Izuku signed. Soon the two were discussing how Izuku's progress was going, and Izuku told Hound Dog how he severed the connection with his classmates, so trusting them was easier, and he didn't feel as uncomfortable around them. Hound Dog even listened to him ramble about some of the theories on electric barrier, and didn't even ask who Izuku trusted that would give him that quirk. Admittedly, it was only after talking about it that Izuku realized he didn't really have any excuse for where it popped up, so he was glad that the counselor didn't ask. "Perhaps you should talk with Kaminari about some of your ideas," the hero suggested. "You've mentioned that he seems nice and has made you laugh." Izuku nodded, remembering the train ride he had with Kaminari and all the times he'd seen the boy in class, though he didn't like how Jiro kept, bullying Kaminari. At first, Izuku thought maybe she was teasing, but while Kaminari would seem to laugh it off, Izuku still saw the hurt in the boy's eyes. Izuku didn't like seeing his classmates being hurt. Maybe he should bring it up with Aizawa, or would Kaminari not want him to speak up to a teacher? Izuku brought the jewelry to his mouth and started chewing on it as his mind wandered. Hound Dog gave a mix between a huff and a growl. "Well, time's up for this week. I'll see you next Thursday." Distractedly, Izuku gave a nod as he exited the office, heading towards the classroom, knowing that the teachers would drive him home since he had to stay late at school. "The answer's no, sorry, but I just don't feel like dating anyone." Midnight's voice sounded from around a corner as Izuku headed in that direction. "You won't give me a chance," Ectoplasm said, and Izuku tensed. He hadn't managed to get gifts for Ectoplasm yet, though at least Izuku hadn't had to see him in class today given he had been in the teacher's lounge. "No, my heart belongs to someone else, and I don't think I'll ever give it to anyone else," Midnight said, voice serious. "I understand," Ectoplasm said, and Izuku heard the trace of anger in his voice. Hearing footsteps coming his way, Izuku shoved himself to the wall, hoping the cloning hero wouldn't notice him, seeing as the last time the two had run into each other, the teacher had shoved him. He heard heels clicking against the floor, also coming in this direction, and he saw the way ectoplasm glared at him as he passed by. And then Midnight rounded the corner. The woman saw him. "Heading towards Shota?" the woman asked, voice warm. Izuku nodded. Midnight smiled and offered a hand to him. "Come on, I'll walk you to him." He gave a hesitant smile and grabbed her hand, and he hoped the glare he felt burning through his skull was just imagination. They walked in silence, though it was a comfortable silence. When they arrived, she reached over and ruffled his hair. Instinctively, he stiffened, but then he relaxed a bit, trusting she wouldn't hurt him. After all, Aizawa and Yamada trusted her. Izuku entered the room, and Aizawa looked up, giving him a nod. "I have a few things left to finish up." Izuku just sat down and pulled out a notebook, not minding that he had to wait. About 10 minutes later, Aizawa finished up work and stood up. Izuku put away his journal and followed after his teacher as they went to go find Yamada, who, as it turned out, was also doing some work. The two waited a few more minutes before the English teacher finished up. "Let's get you home, little listener." Izuku nodded, even though the very thought had him frowning. The apartment didn't feel like a home. Not anymore. It was just so empty. Unlike now, being in the vehicle, the trashed vehicle, Izuku stared at the broken windows of the car before turning to look inquisitive at his teachers. "Zashi ended up breaking the windows this morning when we heard the news." Izuku gave a nod, a bit relieved he hadn't accidentally broken them. Anyways, the apartment was nothing like spending time with Aizawa and Yamada. The two teachers were just full of life, that even when he was just sitting in the room with him, it didn't feel heavy and oppressing. All too soon the drive ended, and Izuku went to his apartment. Heading towards his room, he opened his window before pulling off his bag and grabbing the homework Ida had handed to him from the classes he had missed earlier. At least it was a slight distraction. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 58 of Little Acts of Kindness. Chapter 59 will be up next. Hope you all are still enjoying this one, and as always, thank you so much for listening.